Okay, for our second breakout session, fundamentals and interactive exercise. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the challenges that people face when they're managing knowledge in documents. We're going to use an exercise for that. We're going to ask for some volunteers. So hopefully we get some. If we don't, we'll just pick some, I suppose. But Ryan Shields, one of our application engineers from Auros, is going to be presenting with me during this session. So I'll let him kind of go over what we're going to talk about, frame it out, and then we'll get into what we're doing.
So first off, though, as he said, we are going to need some volunteers for this exercise. So we're only going to need 4. It's going to be real simple. It's going to be fun. I think you guys will enjoy it. So if anyone wants to participate, raise your hand, come on stage. We'll explain everything you need to do when you come up here, but I really think you guys would like it if you did. So do we have any people in the audience that would like to come up? Come on, don't be shy.
Doug, you want to do it?
Doug, come on, Doug.
Doug goes, no, I don't. I know.
We got
Jim
one
will
over
do
here.
it.
Got
Mike
Doug.
will go.
2 more, please. I think it's better than sitting down. You get to come up here and have a fun little exercise.
So Kim will do it, and Jim will
I guess
come
we just
up.
need, too many now. We're just only going to need one of you guys.
Oh,
Or
he goes too many.
If you 2 want to come up, yeah, that's cool.
Thank you.
Okay. So why don't you guys all come up on stage? And then why don't you introduce yourselves and then tell us if it's the first time you're here to the conference or if you've been here longer.
Hi everyone, my name is Jitin and this is my first time attending this conference. I'm from ZF, I'm into quality assurance.
Cool.
And with our company, we're planning to implement Auros.
Thank you.
Michael Van Middlesworth, first time, and then quality at Barak Lighting Systems.
Name's Doug Penn, first time here at an Auros conference. Work with Eaton Corporation, I'm a simulation analyst.
Akshay, I work as a product engineer in Tenneco right now, and absolute first time with Auros and knowledge management console.
All right, great. So we got a lot of first timers. I think it's going to be really good for the exercise. And then one quick question for you guys before we start. Do you have any experience working with explosives by any chance?
Explosives.
Explosives, yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Fireworks.
Okay, fireworks, that might help with it. So I didn't tell you guys what you're volunteering for, but we're basically going to have you guys defuse a bomb for us today. But don't worry, it's not a real bomb. It's a virtual simulated bomb, so there's no chance of explosions. I just wanted to see what your level of experience with that first is. But
Hopefully there's some good knowledge packs to guide us.
we'll see. So that's kind of what I'm going to explain what's going to go on here right now. Is we're going to have 2 different teams set up here. As Josh was saying, kind of talking about the difference between a document-based approach and a knowledge-aware approach, is we're going to have one team using a document-based approach. We have this big, thick manual over here that explains everything that you need to do to disarm this bomb. And then we're going to have another team that's going to use the knowledge-aware approach to use Auros as instructions to disarm the bomb. So there's going to be 2 teams, 2 different approaches probably to do that. There's going to be one person that's going to be kind of handling the bomb, diffusing the bomb, and then one person explaining the instructions to them. And within the bomb itself, you're going to have a bomb, and there's going to be 4 different modules that need to be diffused to essentially disarm the bomb as a whole. And when you disarm one of those modules, a green light will pop up saying that you correctly diffused that module, and you can move on to the next one. And then Stephen here is our Auros bomb technician expert, will explain a little more about how to interact with the computers and solve the bomb with you guys over there. And while we do that, then Josh.
You guys, Doug, Akshay, come over here. We'll have you guys be the non-Auros team.
Okay.
You guys can sit down at those ones. Stephen will explain to you what's going on. While you're getting that ready, we're going to do a little bit of talking, and then we'll start you up in a couple minutes.
So you guys don't touch anything yet. Let me just get these guys situated real quick.
Okay, so while they're getting ready, we'll go through the learning points for the exercise. We want to talk about the 7 points of failure with documents, and then what types of things we can do from a knowledge-aware approach that'll help us mitigate those potential failures. So the first one's going to be it's difficult to find. So knowledge is hard to find. I'm sure we're all familiar with these kinds of things. You have knowledge stored and captured in a lot of different places. And if you need to know where it is, it's very difficult. Oftentimes you need knowledge or documents to tell you how to find the knowledge and documents that you need, right? So difficult to find is the first one. Then we actually find the knowledge. Let's say we navigate through all those systems and we find the knowledge that we're looking for. But when we find it, it doesn't have relevance to what we're actually doing. So we're looking for lessons learned on Project X. And we get Project X lessons learned, but they have to do with the Y and Z aspects of Project X, right? So it's not actually relevant to what we're looking for. Then the third one we talked a little bit about in the presentation before, that knowledge isn't up to date. So that particular piece of information about Project X that really has to do with Project Y and Z was authored 3 years ago, and it isn't even relevant, and it's not up to date anymore. The fourth one is it's hard to understand. So we find it, it's relevant to us, it's actually not, or it actually is up to date, but we can't understand what it is. So there's a lot of different information in it. There's a lot of document bloat, so to speak, like we talked about in the first presentation, a little bit in the second one. And it's hard to actually go through and understand what is captured in that in that document. So our fifth one is going to be that it's verbose and incomplete. Similar to hard to understand, this is one of the reasons that it would be hard to understand, right? It's verbose. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of words, but they don't really mean anything. So we'll have exercises where people are required to go through and they're going to document knowledge. So what do? They go and they take a document, and because they're required, they write 3 or 4 different sentences that they know will fill the page, but they don't really capture anything. So it's verbose, it's incomplete. It doesn't actually capture the information that needs to be captured and communicated to people. Then the sixth one is going to be that it's not actionable. So you might put something into a document that says reduce the weight or make sure you meet the specification. But what does that actually mean? How do you actually take action on reduce the weight? Then the sixth one is going to be because all of these 6 things, people just don't trust it anymore, right? Because it's hard for me to find, because it lacks relevance, because it's not up to date, because it's verbose, because it's hard to understand, because it's not actionable, I just don't trust it, so I don't do it. And when we go to our customer sites, we go to prospect sites, all the time they tell us, yeah, we have a lessons learned database. So we'll ask the question, who has a lessons learned database? Just show of hands, who at their organization has a lessons learned database? And then we ask the question, keep your hand up if people use it. And everyone puts their hand down. So what we want to do through this approach is we want to start to change that, and we want to deliver the information. We want to capture it well. We don't want people to have to find it. We want it to be actionable. And we'll talk about some of the things that we'll do that will help to encourage people to do that by building trust in the system that we have. So I think at this point in time, I got trigger happy on the slides. We're going to have the guys start. You guys understand how the game works. We're going to put the bombs up on the screens. Oh, we are doing polling. Sorry. I forgot about polling. Let's do the polling. So does your organization use documents to capture standards, best practices, guidelines, et cetera? So if you guys open up your app, there's a polling question. You can answer it. We assume that everyone is going to answer yes to this. And then we have a follow-on question to this as well. So we assume that most people use documents and that their organizations tell them to capture lessons learned, to capture processes, standards, best practices, all that kind of stuff. So our follow-up question to that, which I guess is not something that you'll be able to answer if you say no to that, but if we do our next polling question, this one is multiple choice. I think. So the second polling question is going to be, how effective do you think that process is? What's your experience with using documents? So we expect these answers to kind of come in the middle. We don't expect a whole lot of people to say that they love the documents. We don't expect a whole lot of people to say that the documents are completely not useful to them. But we want to start getting everyone into the A category and say that I love knowledge aware, please give me more. Okay, so we're going to have you guys start. We're going to put the bombs on the screen. Stephen's gone through how they're going to do this. Everyone on my left or your right is the document-based approach team. The group on my right, your left, is the knowledge aware team, and the rules have been captured in Auros, so they're going to use that to defuse the bomb.
Yeah, when they click start.
Yeah, go ahead. You guys can go ahead and click start.
Start it up. We're going to talk about.
All right, so while these guys are doing this, we're going to talk a little bit more about the different failure points. We'll talk about some stories that we have for different organizations and how people did those things and what they did. So the first learning point that we talked about was it's difficult to find. So we already talked about a lot of the places that information can be stored in. So you may have a SharePoint, you may have documents on a hard drive, you may have different design guidelines and things like that that are required to actually complete things, but those multiple locations make it very difficult for information to be found. Then within the document, we talked about the document blow. So a lot of times in documents, we'll see a table of contents. We'll see an introduction page. And then as you go down, there's a diagram of a process, or there's a diagram of a part. And then the information about how to evaluate that part or the things that need to be done in order to design the part, right, are buried in the document 3 or 4 pages down the list. So with that particular process, it's very difficult to find information. If I'm an engineer and I'm going through these documents, how do I know what it is that I'm supposed to pull out and apply to my particular process? So this information is very difficult for me to find and to get through. The next part is the lacking relevance to the end user. So we talked about project X, Y, and Z. If we use an example of maybe completing the scope in our particular scoping session for our process, if I know that I have to do the scope and I get to it, but I don't particularly know how to do the scope, if I open up the knowledge packet and it's talking about scoping a project that's maybe engineering specific, but I'm trying to scope a project that is specific to project management, it's going to be very difficult for me to find, number one, but then it's not relevant to me. So lessons learned is the best example of this. When people find information in a lesson learned database, we usually see about 15% of information that's in a lesson learned database is actually good information. So when you find something, it oftentimes lacks relevance to the end user, and it's difficult for them to use that information even if they do find it. So we're going to check in, I think, now with the games. So we have the group that is knowledge aware. They're working on their first module. So we have 15 minutes. Hopefully we're able to finish this stuff within the 15 minutes. So our group on the left-hand side is also still doing 4. So it's going to look really bad if those guys can't do theirs before these guys, but we're hopeful that that'll be the case. Okay, so now we'll talk about the third failure point. So information not being up to date. We talked about it with our sunset algorithm in Auros, but one of the things that people don't trust systems for, they don't trust knowledge for, is because it isn't up to date. So someone that authored it left the organization, so it's difficult for them to find. They finally find it. It does have relevance to what they're trying to do, but it's out of date. The person that authored it, maybe it's incomplete, and the person that authored it is no longer with the organization. No one's reviewed it within the last 2 or 3 years. So it's very difficult for people to trust that type of system. And the way that we can try to ensure that these things are up to date is by ensuring that they're reused. So with a document, when we store it in a database, we store it as a lesson learned. There's no way for us to ensure that it's been reused. We can put an item in a checklist that says, did you do lessons learned? People check the box and say they did do lessons learned, but we don't know what yes, I did lessons learned means. We can't ensure that they've actually reused that document itself in their process. What we want to do with the assessment control is take that information, turn it into a knowledge packet, deliver it to the user when and where they need it, and then it gets evaluated. That makes it a lot easier to make sure that the information doesn't decay over time, that it doesn't get stale and it's not out of date. So then the fourth one is that it's hard to understand. So we're all, I'm sure, familiar with information that's been hard to understand. It's difficult for people to figure out what the author was trying to convey. So one of the reasons that happens is the inconsistent capture, right? So if you have a Word document in one area, you have a PowerPoint in another area, you may have an Excel file in another area, what the knowledge packet's going to do is we're going to make it consistent from one community to the next. So we're actually going to see knowledge captured the same way in the quality community and this, as it is in the product development community. So that visual digestion and the way that people capture the information is consistent, which helps our users understand what's actually being captured and conveyed. And then the next thing for hard to understand is our SMEs aren't necessarily skilled or trained in knowledge capture, right? You're a subject matter expert at ZF on brakes. You're not an expert on how do I capture knowledge about brakes. The template is going to provide you a way to capture that knowledge effectively, make it actionable, so that it can be useful and it can be understood by the end user. All right, we've got a couple other check-ins here. So we have one. These guys are still working, so that's good for us because it looks the way that it's supposed to look. So how are you guys doing over here?
Terrible.
He says terrible. What are some of the things that you're struggling with the paper, with the document?
With basically useless information in here.
So it's difficult for you to find the information. There's a lot of pages. One is pointing to the other. So a lot of the things that we talked about conceptually, we have the manual. They're going through it. And Doug's sitting over here. He's not cutting any wires because they can't figure out how to cut the wires, right? On the other side, they've got one of the modules diffused. So when your group over here is going through finding the information, if you need to find information on one module, has it been easy for you to do? Is it difficult for you to do? What's the experience been so far, I guess, to this point? The finding the information.
Yep.
So it's been structured in a way that when they're actually diffusing one module, the rules for that module are being delivered to them directly. Okay, so we'll go through the next couple failure points of the document-based approach, how knowledge aware can help mitigate those failure modes. So the fifth one is going to be that it's verbose and incomplete. So we talked about our subject matter experts not being trained in capturing knowledge. They're not trained in the actual documentation of knowledge. So what that can lead to is verbose statements. So there may be 3 or 4 sentences about the concept, but those sentences don't actually communicate what the end user needs to know in order to accomplish the task. So a lot of times we talked about at the end of a project, you're required to capture your lessons learned. So because it's a requirement, I'm going to capture them, but I don't really have trust that that's going to be used, so I'm just going to write sentences down so that I can check the box that our lessons learned were captured. I'm going to store them in the database, and that can lead to the information being verbose, whether it has a lot of text that doesn't really say anything, or it can be incomplete, or both, right? We can have a lot of text that doesn't say anything, which makes it incomplete. So the task has been completed, but the knowledge hasn't been captured effectively. The other thing that a lot of times our subject matter experts will do is that they take certain things for granted. So if I've been producing brakes my entire career, there are certain nuances that go into that don't necessarily get captured. If we have to put a model together that end users are going to interact with that we can test, the completion of that information and the things that we're going to take for granted, the chances that those are now going to get captured are going to go up. So the verbose and incomplete in the knowledge aware approach, we're going to be able to put together templates, create functional models of the knowledge that help us reduce the chances that those things occur. And then our sixth one, which I guess isn't the last one, but the seventh failure mode is really a product of the first 6, so the information isn't actionable. So we talked about reduce the weight. Well, how do I actually reduce the weight? Or meet this requirement. You can say, yes, I met the requirement, or no, I didn't meet the requirement. But if you instead have to answer questions about what you did, so did you meet the minimum requirement, is different from what's your part thickness. If you're putting in information about the part thickness and the actual characteristics of the knowledge that go into passing the rule, then it becomes actionable. It becomes the things that you actually did, and that detail becomes more complete. It becomes more understandable to the end user, And then it allows us to not only know that we meet the clearance or not only know that we have the safety sign in the right spot, but we can put information in about that and we can actually take action on the information if we're not within the specifications of the knowledge. So the last failure point is the lack of end user trust. So if things are difficult to find, we talked a little bit about this in the opening, if they're difficult to find, if they lack relevance to the end user, if they are verbose, if they're out of date, all those things lead to people not trusting the system. So when Jeff talked about email in our first presentation, when email first came out, people didn't trust it and no one used it. So when people don't capture lessons learned or they don't do it in a way that they know it's going to be used, a lot of times they don't take it seriously. They take those things for granted because they know they're just checking a box and storing a document somewhere that no one's even going to look at. With the knowledge-aware approach, we're ensuring it's going to be reused. We're going to collect the feedback. We can provide insights based on all those things. So as we start to put those processes in place, people then start to trust that it is going to be reused. It is going to get communicated to people on the future projects. And the same way that over time people send emails and they actually do these things just second nature as part of their daily work, knowledge-aware and capturing knowledge becomes the same thing. And then we can start to also interact these things with models. So we can interact with models, we can take the failures, we can programmatically start to capture that data and use it to refine our knowledge base. So we can start to get to the point where people don't have to manually capture lessons learned. They don't have to manually evaluate the knowledge that is being delivered to them. But none of that happens if people don't trust the system. So all these document-based approaches, they have failure modes in them, and they don't allow you, we're getting down to 45 seconds, right? And it doesn't look like either team's gonna defuse the bomb. But luckily, one is gonna get closer than the other one. Oh, and it looks like the guys over here maybe blew up already.
It's only one strike, isn't it?
Only one says.
I think there's a problem with the holding.
Yeah.
They're really close to getting the vertical wires.
So we use these bombs as an example of how using the knowledge-aware approach can allow you to get closer to defusing the bomb than if you don't use the knowledge-aware approach. But the idea here is to just highlight the failure modes of document capture, the way that knowledge is done traditionally at organizations today, and how the knowledge-aware approach can really help to build end-user trust in the system, ensure that knowledge is delivered to the right place at the right time, and then provide better outcomes as we're working and as we're doing our jobs within our processes.
Yeah, I think there's a penalty on strike for that one, I would guess.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's not fair if they're going faster.
Okay, so to recap, the document-based approach, there are a lot of failure modes that we see every day in our jobs that we know people are not going to trust the system because of those things. With the knowledge-aware approach at our different organizations, at our customer sites, we've been able to see people start with the documents, they start to do things in a knowledge-aware way, and we can talk to a lot of different people that are in the other room about the way that they've seen their organization transform the way that they capture, share, and reuse knowledge by having trust in the system, ensuring that it's used, ensuring that it's up to date, putting together templates so that people are forced to capture knowledge completely. And those are the things that we know we can accomplish, and we want to promote this knowledge-aware concept so that we can do it at a lot of organizations where it's not being done today. So does anyone have any questions about the failure points? Doug's getting close.
It just turned red. Got 2 strikes.
Do we have any questions just about the process, about the document-based approach, some of the failure points, how we overcome those particular failure points? Thank you, guys. That's all right. We appreciate you coming up. I know some of you came up not by volunteering, by us calling you out, but we appreciate that. So thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions about the presentation?
They've already sent theirs.
If you do, raise your hand, and one of the application engineers will come around.
got one module.
We did have one question for you guys with the manual team. Based on how you did it, how much longer do you think it would have taken to actually get to defuse the bomb based on
Maybe a day.
day? Okay, that's probably a good estimate. I know they got a little, they were close to getting those vertical wires.
Probably would have
ran out
really
of
had
time.
to sit and read that thing. 'Cause
Yes, because a lot of those pages were basically repeats, right? So one, you would have to confirm which version of that same page is correct,
Okay.
right? And few pages in Italian,
Right.
That was a little
add
rough.
that to the mix.
So one of the things that, I mean, is pretty obvious here is we stacked the deck, right? So this document is very difficult to use. There's a lot of information that's not relevant, but that's the whole point. I mean, the whole point is that we want to stack the deck. We want to give people the ability to do their job without having to sift through all the information that's in a document. It's very difficult to do that if we can't ensure that the information is being applied, track how it's being applied, and start to understand and close this loop of learning because the information is being applied and it's being used. So we did stack the deck, but the whole point is using the knowledge-aware approach is stacking the deck. Thank you guys, I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks for this.
Okay, so with this one, if you can go into your app and give us some feedback on this presentation as well. We are really open to feedback about the event and about the conference. We started this event as a one-day event. The reason that we have a second day is because of feedback that we received from end users. We started the second day as one session with everyone in the same room. The reason that we have two sessions is because of feedback that we got from people that attended the conference. So if you guys can provide us your feedback, whether it's positive or negative, we appreciate it, because we are always trying to improve the event so that it is more valuable for people that attend.